My suitcase hit the cobblestone driveway with a loud thud, kicking me out of the house I grew up in. I yelled toward the second-floor window. His mistress smirked casually, holding my late mother's favorite antique teacup. The neighbors were already out recording the drama on their smartphones. But I didn't cry. I just took a deep breath and dialed an emergency number I had saved a long time ago. 20 minutes later, the arrival of a distinguished older man in a tailored suit brought my husband's arrogant laughter to a dead halt. The man held up a legal document. My husband's face went ghost white as he read the print. He stared blankly at the sprawling estate, then down at me still sitting calmly on my suitcase. That afternoon, the sky over our affluent neighborhood in Westchester County, New York, felt suffocatingly low. Thick, dark gray storm clouds rolled in heavy with the promise of a torrential summer downpour. The air was hot, muggy, and oppressive, the kind of humid weather that makes your clothes stick to your skin and ignites tempers. Yet no matter how stifling the heat was outside, nothing could match the fiery rage exploding right in front of me. "Get out! Take your junk, and don't you ever set foot on my property again!" Derek's baritone voice thundered, shattering the quiet suburban afternoon. My husband, or rather soon-to-be ex-husband, gripped my upper arm with a rough, massive hand. He squeezed with enough force that I knew a purple bruise would bloom there by morning. He practically dragged me through the front doors of the stately modern colonial home I had lived in since I was born. I didn't fight back, not because I was weak, but because I knew physical resistance would only waste my precious energy. I let him pull me down the brick steps, past the manicured front lawn my late mother used to tend to with such love, until we reached the towering wrought iron gates. With a dramatic, violent shove, Derek hurled my large burgundy suitcase. God knows how haphazardly he had stuffed my clothes inside it. The suitcase tumbled and landed with a pathetic smack on the paver driveway. Its wheels spun wildly for a second before stopping, looking utterly miserable beneath the overcast, gloomy sky. "Derek, what is the meaning of this?" I asked. My voice came out remarkably steady, far calmer than my heart, which was currently hammering against my ribs. I kept my tone flat, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me hysterical. Derek put his hands on his hips, his chest heaving. His usually handsome face was contorted into something ugly, twisted by malice and overflowing arrogance. Sweat beaded at his temples, making him look even more unhinged. "What is the meaning of this? You're seriously asking?" He let out a dry laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "This is payback, Sarah. I am so sick of your holier-than-thou attitude. I'm sick of living in the shadow of your nagging dead mother. She's gone, and now you have absolutely no one." He pointed a trembling finger at the magnificent house behind us. "Listen to me very carefully, Sarah. From this second on, this house is mine, absolutely mine. I'm the one who worked my ass off all these years. I'm the head of this household. It's only right that I call the shots. You're just a spoiled, ungrateful housewife." I stared at him, searching for any trace of the man I had married 5 years ago, the man who had stood at the altar and promised to protect me. But that man was long gone, replaced by the monster standing before me. His arrogance had completely blinded his common sense. He genuinely believed he was entitled to everything, including my family's estate. "You can't do this, Derek. This is my parents' house," I said, trying to use logic even though I knew it was futile. "Oh, I absolutely can," he declared triumphantly. He reached into his tailored slacks and pulled out a ring of keys. With a mocking grin, he jingled them right in my face. The metallic clinking sounded like the death knell of our marriage. "Look closely. I just had a locksmith change every deadbolt on the front doors and the gate an hour ago. While you were stupidly out running errands, your old keys became useless pieces of metal. You're never getting back inside." Cruel. It was incredibly calculated and cruel. He had waited for my guard to be down just to lock me out of my own home. Suddenly, movement on the second floor caught my eye. My gaze shifted to the master bedroom window, the room that up until this morning was still mine. Standing there behind the large glass panes was a woman, Vanessa. She wore a vibrant red silk nightgown that sharply contrasted with the gloomy weather outside. Her long, wavy blonde hair was left undone, framing a beautiful face that radiated a cunning aura. She smiled down at me. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the victorious smirk of a mistress who believed she had finally ousted the legal wife. But it wasn't her presence in my bedroom that made my blood boil, nor was it the expensive lingerie she was wearing. What made my chest tighten was the object she held in her hand. In her right hand, Vanessa was casually gripping an antique blue floral ceramic teacup. It was my late mother's favorite cup, the one Mom used every single morning to drink her Earl Grey tea while sitting on the porch admiring her hydrangeas. That cup was deeply precious to me, a priceless sentimental heirloom. And now this homewrecker was holding it as if it were a cheap mug she'd picked up at a yard sale. Vanessa raised the cup slightly toward me, as if toasting to my ruin, and took a slow sip. Her eyes never left mine, savoring every second of the agony she imagined I was feeling. This scene, my husband screaming on the lawn like a lunatic, and his mistress drinking from my dead mother's cup in my bedroom, was the absolute definition of a nightmare. Derek's commotion, of course, had not gone unnoticed. In a wealthy suburban cul-de-sac like this, where the houses aren't too far apart and walls seem to have ears, even a small shout draws curiosity, let alone Derek bellowing about claiming ownership of an estate. One by one, front doors cracked open. Brenda, the neighborhood gossip, whose main hobby was compiling the HOA's latest scandals, stepped out in her velour tracksuit, pretending to check her mailbox even though the mail had already run. Her sharp eyes immediately locked onto my pathetic-looking suitcase. Other neighbors stepped out onto their porches. Some whispered to each other with feigned looks of sympathy. Others outright pulled out their iPhones. Within seconds, cameras were pointed at us. I could see the occasional flash go off despite the daylight. They were recording the tragedy of my life as if it were a free reality TV show. "Oh my God, poor Sarah," one neighbor whispered loud enough for me to hear. "She's been nothing but an angel. Took care of her sick mother for so long, and now her husband kicks her to the curb." "Who is that in the upstairs window?" "Another woman," asked another neighbor, zooming in with her phone. "Wow, Derek has lost his mind. It hasn't even been a year since Eleanor passed, and he's already moved his mistress in." The voices buzzed in my ears like annoying flies. I knew that in a matter of minutes, these videos would be plastered all over the neighborhood Facebook group, and by tomorrow, I'd be the trending local topic as the scorned wife. Derek didn't seem to care about the audience. If anything, he reveled in the spotlight. He felt emboldened by my silence. He thought I was quiet because I was terrified, because I was broken, because I didn't know what to do. "Look at her." Derek spread his arms wide as if welcoming applause. "She can't even defend herself. What a weak, pathetic woman. Go on, go crawl back to your broke relatives, or go find some other rich guy to leech off of." I remained standing exactly where I was next to my suitcase. My feet felt heavy, glued to the hot pavers. I looked from Derek, drunk on power, to Vanessa smirking in the window, and then to the faces of the drama-starved neighbors. Anyone else might have collapsed into hysterical sobs or maybe thrown a rock through the window and dragged that mistress out by her hair. But I didn't. My mother had always taught me, Sarah, tears won't solve problems in front of people who want to break you. Never show your enemy your weakness. Save your crying for your pillow at night, but in the daylight, use your brain. Mom's advice echoed clearly in my mind, serving as the anchor keeping me from drowning in my emotions. I took a deep breath, inhaling the heavy pre-storm air and the smell of damp earth. Very slowly, I straightened my posture. I looked dead into Derek's eyes. No tears, no pleading, just a cold, hollow stare. Derek faltered slightly under my unexpected gaze. He was probably expecting me to drop to my knees. My silence was my first act of rebellion. "This isn't over, Derek. It has only just begun." The sun hiding behind the storm clouds felt like it was baking my skin. Even without direct sunlight, the humid air trapped between these mansions made it feel like an oven. A cold sweat dripped down my back, not from the heat, but from the residual adrenaline of the confrontation. Derek had marched back inside, slamming the heavy oak double doors so hard they rattled, as if to declare that the fortress was now securely locked against me. The loud click of the deadbolt echoed a final declaration of war. I was left alone on the sidewalk outside my own gates, accompanied only by a piece of luggage. The neighbors were still holding their positions, though some had lowered their phones, assuming Act 1 of the play was over. Making my movements as casual as possible, I tipped my maroon suitcase upright and sat down on it. It was hard and uncomfortable, but I needed to rest my shaking legs. I refused to sit on the asphalt or the curb like an evicted beggar. Sitting on my suitcase was a way to maintain whatever shred of dignity I had left. I was still the legal owner of the ground I was parked on, even if a gate currently separated me from it. Brenda tentatively walked over. In her hand was a chilled bottle of Evian water. Her face showed a mix of genuine pity and a desperate hunger for gossip. "Sarah, honey," she called softly from across the property line. "Are you all right? Here, drink some water. You must be in shock." I turned to her and forced a thin smile. I knew her intentions might have been partly good, but I couldn't accept anyone's charity right now. Taking that water meant admitting I was a victim needing rescue, and today I could not afford to look like a victim. "Thank you, Brenda. I'm completely fine. Please don't trouble yourself." I declined politely but firmly. My voice was a bit raspy but remarkably stable. Brenda looked disappointed either because her offer was rejected or because she failed to bait me into spilling my guts. She pulled her hand back. "All right then, sweetie. If you need anything, just holler. That Derek. What a monster." She lingered for a moment, hoping I'd open up, but I turned my face back toward my house. Eventually, she backed away, rejoining the gaggle of whispering housewives a few yards down the street. I ignored them all. My focus shifted entirely to one item inside my leather tote bag, my cell phone. With slightly sweaty hands, I pulled it out. The screen lit up, showing 1:50 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I unlocked it and went straight to my contacts. My thumb scrolled rapidly past friends and distant relatives until it stopped on a very specific name, saved simply as Estate Emergency. His real name was Arthur Sterling. He was a senior partner at a prestigious law firm, my late mother's closest confidant and her most trusted advisor for decades. A few weeks before Mom took her final breath, she had told me, "Sarah, if the day ever comes when Derek steps completely out of line and you feel you can't handle him alone anymore, call Arthur. Don't call anyone else. Save his number. Consider him your ultimate trump card." But at the time I had merely nodded, fighting back tears praying that day would never come. I still wanted to believe Derek could change, that our marriage was salvageable after Mom's passing. How naive I was. The day Mom had feared arrived much sooner than expected, and in a form far uglier than I could have imagined. I hit the call button. The line rang. Ring, ring. My heart pounded with each tone. I knew that once this call connected, there was no going back. This was the turning point. This was the moment I stopped being the patient, enduring wife and became the brilliant, calculating daughter of Eleanor. On the third ring, he picked up. "Hello, Sarah, my dear." Arthur's distinguished, authoritative voice came through, sounding mildly surprised to get a call from me in the middle of the day. I took a deep breath, making sure my voice wouldn't quiver. "Hello, Mr. Sterling. Good afternoon." "Good afternoon, Sarah. What's going on?" "It's rare for you to call. Is there a problem?" His sharp legal instincts kicked in immediately. He could sense the tension in my overly formal tone. I closed my eyes for a second, gathering all my courage. The image of Vanessa holding my mother's teacup flashed in my mind, giving me the final push I needed. "Arthur," I said, my voice ice-cold and devoid of pleasantries. "It's time." There was a heavy silence on the other end. I could picture Arthur in his mahogany-paneled office, setting down his Mont Blanc pen and sitting up straight. He understood the code. He knew exactly what "it" meant. "Where are you right now, Sarah?" he asked, his tone shifting into something sharp and deadly serious. "I'm outside my front gate, sitting on my suitcase by the curb," I replied, reporting the facts with zero emotion. Derek just forcibly kicked me out. He threw my belongings onto the driveway. I heard a sharp intake of breath from Arthur. "That insolent boy." "And one more thing," I added, looking at the heavy iron gates. "He changed all the locks. I can't get in." "Good, very good. He just dug his own grave 6 feet deeper," Arthur said, sounding like a 5-star general preparing for war. "Listen to me, Sarah. Stay exactly where you are. Do not go anywhere. Do not speak a single word to anyone, especially to Derek. If he comes back out, show absolutely no emotion. Let the neighbors see you sitting there. They are our witnesses." "Yes, Arthur, I understand." "Yes. I am leaving right now. Give me 20 minutes. Traffic on the parkway might be a bit backed up because of the incoming storm, but I'll be there as fast as I can. I am bringing the ammunition your mother prepared. Hold the line, my dear. The cavalry is on its way." "Thank you, Arthur." The call ended. I lowered my phone and rested my hands in my lap. 20 minutes. I just needed to endure 20 more minutes under the judgmental stares of the neighborhood and the darkening sky. Meanwhile, the front double doors opened again. Derek walked out. This time Vanessa followed. They both looked obscenely smug. Derek wrapped his arm around her waist affectionately, a sight that made my stomach churn. They sat down on the wicker patio chairs on the veranda, the exact chairs where Mom used to sit and laugh. Vanessa was still holding the teacup. She pointed at me, whispering something into Derek's ear. Then they both burst into laughter. The sound of their mocking laughter carried on the wind, reaching the street. Derek looked at me from a distance with pure disdain. I could guess exactly what he was thinking. He probably thought I had just called an aunt out of state to cry and complain. He thought I was begging for a place to crash. He thought he had won a flawless victory. He had no idea who I had just called. He had no idea what kind of hurricane was currently speeding toward him in the form of a black luxury sedan driven by a senior attorney. Laugh while you can, Derek, I thought to myself, staring blankly at them without blinking. Celebrate your fake victory with your little scam artist, because in 20 minutes, the fantasy world you've built on my pain is going to collapse. I sat quietly on my suitcase. A strong gust of wind blew past, carrying the heavy scent of impending rain. Thunder rumbled ominously in the distance. It felt as though the universe itself was composing the soundtrack to my vengeance. I wasn't afraid of the storm. I wasn't afraid of Derek. I was just waiting. Those 20 minutes felt like the slowest crawl of time I had ever experienced. It felt as if a giant clock in the sky had stopped ticking, leaving me permanently paralyzed in this humiliating moment. The sky grew darker. Thick black clouds entirely blotted out the sun, making it look like late evening instead of early afternoon. The wind picked up, sending dry leaves and street dust swirling around, violently flapping the edges of Brenda's tracksuit as she remained stationed behind her mailbox. I was still perched on my maroon suitcase. My legs were starting to cramp and my back ached from sitting without support. But I refused to adjust my posture. I remained as still as a stone gargoyle cast out from its own gates. My eyes were fixed on the asphalt, which was just beginning to spot with the first few heavy drops of rain. Around me, the neighbors' whispers began to die down, replaced by boredom and the urgency to beat the rain. Several had already retreated indoors, likely to shut their windows, though I could see silhouettes lingering behind their living room blinds. They were waiting for the next act. Or maybe they assumed the show was over, and I was just a pathetic woman waiting for an Uber to take me away forever. Derek and Vanessa were still on the veranda. Occasionally the wind carried their laughter to me. It sounded discordant and grating like nails on a chalkboard. Derek even yelled out to me once more from the porch, "What are you waiting for? A private jet. Get your ass out of here before it downpours and makes your cheap luggage smell even worse." I didn't answer. I was just counting down the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. Right as my count hit 60, marking the 19th minute, the smooth, powerful purr of an engine approached from the intersection. It wasn't the rattling of an Amazon delivery van, nor the loud rumble of the neighbor's diesel SUV. It was a refined, quiet, upper-class hum. A gleaming black Lincoln Continental glided around the corner. It rolled slowly down the suburban street, cutting through the neighborhood with an intimidating elegance. The windows were tinted pitch black, hiding whoever was inside. But the aura it projected was unmistakable. This was not a regular visitor. The car was spotless, gleaming despite the windy, gloomy weather, a stark contrast to my sad suitcase sitting on the curb. The Lincoln pulled up and parked right in front of the gate to my house, the house Derek claimed was his. It angled itself slightly, effectively blocking the neighbor's line of sight, acting as a protective steel shield for me. The engine cut off, and a brief silence enveloped the street. The driver's door opened, and a man in a crisp chauffeur's suit stepped out. He jogged briskly around the hood to open the rear passenger door. This sight alone was enough to make Brenda and the remaining onlookers drop their jaws. In this upper-middle-class suburb, seeing a private driver open a door was a rarity. From the back seat stepped a figure I knew very well, Arthur Sterling. Though he was in his late 60s, his posture was impeccably straight. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit that screamed old money, complete with a silk tie. His dress shoes shone brilliantly. In his right hand, he carried a heavy, distressed leather briefcase that looked full of dangerous secrets. His face was calm, but his sharp eyes, magnified behind gold-rimmed glasses, exuded an authority that would make anyone think twice before crossing him. Arthur looked down at me for a split second and gave a barely perceptible nod as if saying, "Stay calm, my dear. I am here." Then he turned to face the house, Derek. Noticing the luxury vehicle parked out front, immediately stood up from his patio chair. For a moment, his curiosity overpowered his arrogance. He strode confidently down the walkway toward the gate, a mix of confusion and annoyance on his face. Vanessa trailed closely behind him, still clutching my mother's teacup, looking suddenly wary. "Who the hell is this?" Derek shouted through the iron bars. His voice was loud, an obvious attempt to mask his insecurity upon seeing Arthur's vastly superior presence. "Hey, pal, you can't just park in front of my driveway. This is private property." Arthur didn't answer the shout. He walked with measured, unhurried steps toward the locked gates. Each step radiated a quiet, deadly threat. He stopped right in front of the iron bars, looking at Derek through the gaps, with the exact same stare he used to dismantle hostile witnesses in a courtroom. "Mr. Derek Vance?" Arthur asked. He didn't yell, but his diction was so heavy and clear that it easily reached my ears 5 yards behind him. It was the voice of absolute power. Derek furrowed his brow. He didn't like being addressed in that tone on what he believed was his own property. "Yeah, that's me. Who are you, Sarah's divorce lawyer? If you want to talk alimony, you can do it in court. Right now I'm relaxing. Get off my property." Arthur smiled a thin, chilling, condescending smile. He wasn't provoked in the slightest. With slow, deliberate movements, he opened his leather briefcase. The click of the brass locks was piercingly loud in the sudden silence. From inside, he pulled out a thick, heavy manila envelope. In the top corner, embossed in gold foil, was the logo of one of New York's most ruthlessly elite law firms. "I am not here to discuss alimony or the division of marital assets, Mr. Vance," Arthur said, sliding the thick envelope through the gap in the iron gate. "Because in order to discuss marital assets, there must actually be shared property to dispute. And this estate has never for a single second been marital property." Derek froze. The sentence short-circuited his brain. He roughly snatched the envelope from Arthur's hand. "What the hell are you talking about? Don't play stupid legal games with me. I'm Sarah's husband. This house was renovated and paid for during our marriage. By default, half of this is mine. Please read it. The documents will clarify your actual standing," Arthur replied calmly, crossing his arms and waiting. With hands shaking from anger, Derek ripped the seal of the envelope. He pulled out a thick stack of documents bound in a blue legal backer. Stamped across the top were the seals of the county clerk and the state registry. It was a quitclaim deed and an irrevocable trust agreement. I watched from where I sat. My heart raced in anticipation. I knew exactly what was in there, but watching Derek's reaction was a priceless satisfaction that money couldn't buy. Derek aggressively flipped through the pages. His eyes darted rapidly, scanning the legal jargon. Suddenly, his movement stopped entirely. His eyes widened to the point of bulging out of his skull. The face that had just been flushed purple with rage drained of all color within seconds, turning as pale as the paper in his hands. His mouth fell open, but no sound came out. Vanessa, sensing the drastic shift in Derek's demeanor, stepped closer and peered at the documents over his shoulder. "What is it, babe? It's just a bluff, right?" Derek didn't answer her. He stared at the paperwork, then at the massive house behind him, then at Arthur, and finally his eyes landed on me. It was no longer a look of arrogance. It was a look of profound, bottomless terror and disbelief. This is impossible," Derek hissed, his voice trembling violently. "This date, a year ago. Why is her name?" Arthur took one step closer, bringing his face near the iron bars. "Exactly. The deed was transferred into a trust a year ago. Its status is an irrevocable gift from Eleanor directly to her daughter Sarah, not an inheritance passed down after death, but a legal transfer made while Eleanor was very much alive, fully notarized and filed with the state. Arthur paused, letting the crushing weight of reality sink into Derek's malfunctioning brain. Which means, Mr. Vance, this property is a pre-existing asset obtained via familial gift. Under New York State property law, inherited or gifted assets kept in a separate trust belong solely to the individual. They are not subject to equitable distribution. You own absolutely 0% of this land and this house. You have zero equity. You are nothing more than a guest who is allowed to stay here. And as of today, the actual homeowner is revoking your invitation. Thunder cracked violently overhead, as if the heavens were celebrating the triumph of truth over greed. The wind whipped Derek's hair around, slapping his pale face. The documents in his hands fluttered wildly, as if trying to escape back to their rightful owner. Derek stumbled backward, his legs giving out slightly. He bumped into Vanessa behind him, causing the tea in my mother's cup to spill onto her expensive red silk gown. "Hey, watch it!" Vanessa shrieked, but Derek didn't care. His entire world had just been obliterated by a few sheets of paper. He looked at me again, but with an entirely different lens. He realized the wife he had always considered submissive and naive had been holding a lethal trump card all along. I met his gaze with absolute icy indifference. Still sitting on my suitcase, I didn't say a word. My silence was now 1,000 times more agonizing to him than any screaming match. The rain finally broke. Large, heavy drops began to hit the asphalt, blurring the scenery. Yet the tension in front of the gate was so thick that not a single one of us moved to find shelter. Arthur stood tall like a fortress wall. Derek looked like a man who had just been struck by lightning. "This is a fake!" Derek suddenly screamed desperately, trying to deny the reality staring him in the face. He shoved the documents toward Arthur with violently shaking hands. "You forged this. Sarah doesn't have the brains to pull this off behind my back. She was at the hospital every single day taking care of her mother. When would she have the time to orchestrate this?" Arthur let out a dry, humorless chuckle. He gestured for me to come forward. I stood up from my suitcase, ignoring the pins and needles in my legs, and walked slowly to Arthur's side. The chauffeur immediately opened a large black umbrella sheltering Arthur and me, while leaving Derek and Vanessa to get soaked on the other side of the gate. "You are correct about one thing, Derek," Arthur said, his voice piercing through the sound of the rain. "Sarah was busy caring for her mother. She is an incredibly devoted daughter. She was so focused on Eleanor's health that she never had the time to worry about money or harbor suspicions." Arthur glared at Derek through his rain-speckled glasses. "But you forgot one crucial detail. Eleanor was not a fool. She was a retired forensic accountant. Her body may have been failing, but her mind was razor-sharp until her dying breath." My mind flashed back to those dark days a year ago. The difficult months in the hospital, Mom lying weak, hooked up to an IV, her breathing labored. I always thought she was just sleeping or staring blankly at the ceiling. I had no idea that behind her silence she was meticulously building an escape pod for me. Arthur pulled another clear folder from his briefcase. This one contained photographs and printed bank statements. 6 months before she passed. Arthur narrated, his voice rising above the downpour. Eleanor hired a private investigator. She felt something was very wrong with her son-in-law, who rarely visited the hospital due to working late. And a mother's intuition is never wrong. Derek's eyes widened in sheer horror as he stared at the folder in Arthur's hand. "Mom knew everything, Derek," I finally spoke. My voice shook not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization of how fiercely my mother had loved me. "She knew you were sleeping with this woman while I was spoon-feeding her in a hospital bed. She knew you went on a business trip to Miami with her using our joint savings while I was sitting next to Mom in the ICU." Arthur pressed one of the photographs against the iron bars. It showed Derek and Vanessa kissing passionately in the lobby of a luxury hotel in South Beach. The timestamp in the corner was crystal clear. It was the exact day after my mother was admitted to intensive care. "Eleanor was heartbroken by your betrayal," Arthur continued coldly, "but she refused to burden Sarah with this pain during her final days. So she moved in silence. She called me to the hospital while Sarah went home to shower. That was when she signed the trust documents. She bypassed the probate process entirely and gifted the house directly to Sarah. Her sole objective was to ensure that a parasite like you would not have a roof over your head the moment Sarah finally opened her eyes. Tears slipped down my cheeks, mixing with the damp air. I remembered that day. I remembered Mom looking exhausted but profoundly relieved when I returned to the hospital. She had gripped my hand tightly and said, "That house is your fortress, Sarah. Guard it well." I didn't understand what she meant then. I thought she was just heavily medicated. In truth, she had just secured my entire future. Derek staggered back again. He looked utterly destroyed. He turned to Vanessa with a desperate, bewildered look, searching for some kind of support. But Vanessa was busy frantically brushing the rain off her silk gown, already putting physical distance between herself and Derek. "And that's not all," Arthur added, refusing to let up the assault. He pulled a highlighted bank statement from the folder. "Eleanor also asked me to trace the finances. We have a solid paper trail of wire transfers from your joint marital account directly into this woman's personal checking account. The money that was supposed to be used for Eleanor's out-of-pocket medical treatments was used by you to buy designer bags and shoes for your mistress." Arthur shoved the paper closer to Derek's face. The yellow highlighted numbers glowed menacingly. "That is a felony, Derek," Arthur spat. "Spousal embezzlement and wire fraud. We could have you arrested right here, right now." But Sarah is feeling merciful. She only wants her property back. However, if you insist on fighting this... Arthur let the threat hang heavily in the damp air. Derek collapsed against the wet, slippery iron gate. His legs had completely turned to jelly. Every ounce of his bravado had evaporated. He finally realized he wasn't dealing with a clueless wife. He was facing the wrath and strategic brilliance of a mother protecting her child from beyond the grave. "This isn't fair," Derek mumbled to himself. "I renovated the kitchen. I put in the koi pond." "With whose money?" I cut in sharply. "With your salary. Your paycheck was blown entirely on your lifestyle and her. You paid for that kitchen remodel by convincing my mother to liquidate her bonds under the guise of home investment." Checkmate. Derek was silenced. Vanessa, who had been quietly listening, suddenly pushed forward. Her beautiful face was marred by panic. She realized the gold mine she had been digging in was completely empty. Derek didn't own the mansion, and the money he threw around was stolen and now heavily monitored by a ruthless lawyer. "Derek," Vanessa's voice was whiny but underscored with a harsh desperation. "You told me the house was in your name. You said you were loaded. What the hell is going on? Are we getting kicked out?" Derek looked at her, his eyes red. "Babe, just calm down. We can explain this. This lawyer has to be wrong." "Wrong about what?" Vanessa snapped, her sweet facade cracking. "That's a legal deed, you idiot. You're the one who was wrong. You lied to me." I watched them turn on each other with absolute emptiness. This was the grand love Derek had sacrificed our marriage for, a love that instantly fractured the second the luxury was stripped away. Arthur looked at me, then checked his gold watch. "Sarah, the rain is getting worse. It's not good for you to be out here. Let's finish this. Open the gate." Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. It was a spare key my mother had given him along with the legal documents, the original key that Derek had no idea existed because it was the master key for the heavy-duty industrial padlock on the main gates, a lock Derek had forgotten to replace when he changed the house doors. Arthur handed the key to me. The cold metal felt heavy in my palm. It wasn't just a gate key, it was the key to my liberation. "Open it, my dear. It's your house," Arthur whispered gently. I stepped forward. Derek and Vanessa instinctively backed away, as if I were holding a loaded gun. Derek reached a hand out as if to stop me, but Arthur's lethal glare made him freeze. With one decisive motion, I slid the key into the padlock. Clack! The sound was crisp and immensely satisfying. The lock popped open. The heavy iron chain hit the driveway with a loud clang. I pushed the massive wrought iron gates wide open. The screeching of the hinges sounded like a choir of victory. I stood in the gateway, looking down at Derek and Vanessa, who now had nowhere to hide. "You have exactly 1 hour to pack," I said, my voice echoing through the downpour. "Take only your personal clothes. If you dare touch a single item belonging to my mother or myself, I will make sure you both sleep in a jail cell tonight." Derek stared at me, his eyes filled with pathetic pleading. "Sarah, please, it's pouring out. Where are we supposed to go?" Anywhere, I replied flatly. As long as it isn't here, your time starts now. I signaled Arthur's driver to bring my suitcase inside. Then, without sparing another glance at the man I once loved, I walked up my driveway. I walked right past a soaking wet Derek, past a cursing Vanessa, and headed straight up to the front porch, the place where my mother's memory still lived. The rain poured down harder, as if washing away the filthy footprints they had left on my property. The storm outside raged on, as if the sky was emptying its tear ducts to scrub the filth from my home. Booming thunder echoed, and flashes of lightning intermittently illuminated the grand foyer, which now felt oddly somber. I stood in the center of the room. The space that used to radiate with my mother's warmth now felt cold and foreign. Derek and Vanessa had followed me inside and were standing awkwardly by the front door. They were drenched. Rainwater dripped from their clothes, forming a pathetic puddle on the imported marble floors that the housekeeper had just polished last week. Derek looked like a beaten dog. His shoulders were slumped, his face pale, and his eyes darted around frantically as if searching for an escape hatch from this nightmare. Vanessa, meanwhile, was desperately trying to cling to the remnants of her faux dignity. She wrung out the hem of her soaked red dress with a scowl, shooting venomous glares at me and Arthur. "Sarah," Derek's voice broke the suffocating silence. It sounded hoarse and pathetic. He took a hesitant step forward, reaching out a hand as if to touch me. "Please just listen. We can talk about this like adults. You don't need to involve outsiders. Mr. Sterling, he doesn't know anything about our marriage." I looked at his outstretched hand with pure disgust, the same hand that had forcefully dragged me out of my house. "Outsiders?" I asked in a deadpan tone. "Arthur is more family to me right now than you are Derek. And talk like adults. Weren't you just screaming on the lawn, throwing me out like a stray dog?" "I was emotional, Sarah. I lost my temper," Derek pleaded, his eyes begging. "You know how much pressure I'm under at work. I was just confused. Please don't do this." "How can you have the heart to kick your own husband out into a thunderstorm?" Arthur, who was standing quietly near my father's old oak bookshelf, cleared his throat. The authoritative sound instantly snapped Derek's jaw shut. The older lawyer opened his briefcase once more and pulled out a slim navy blue folder. Unlike the thick property deeds, this folder was thin, yet it radiated an even more dangerous aura. "Mr. Vance," Arthur said, adjusting his glasses, "before you continue to degrade whatever is left of your dignity by begging the wife you betrayed, we have one final piece of business to attend to. Business regarding the special guest you brought into this home." Arthur shifted his piercing gaze to Vanessa. The woman flinched, her beautiful face, now stripped of its makeup by the rain, betrayed a deep, underlying panic. She tried to act haughty, crossing her arms and tilting her chin up. "What business do you have with me?" Vanessa snapped. Her voice was shrill, masking her fear. "I'm Derek's girlfriend, his future wife. What's your problem? Derek said he was divorcing this boring housewife anyway. That's his right, isn't it?" I almost laughed at being called boring, but I held it in. I wanted a front row seat to the rest of this show. Arthur smiled. This time, it was a genuinely terrifying smile, the smile of an apex predator that has its prey cornered. "Miss Vanessa, apologies. That name doesn't seem quite right. Should I address you by your stage name from the Miami club scene? Or by your actual legal name printed on your driver's license?" Silence. The sound of the rain outside seemed to fade away, leaving only a suffocating tension in the living room. Vanessa's face, previously flushed with anger, turned as white as a sheet. Her eyes, blue wide-open pupils shrinking. She knew that Arthur knew. "What do you mean?" Vanessa took a step back, her voice trembling. Arthur opened the blue folder, slowly savoring the moment. "I believe the story of Vanessa Alexander, the worldly, foreign-educated lifestyle consultant, is nothing more than a beautiful fairy tale. A fairy tale you sell to wealthy, gullible men who are blinded by a little cosmetic enhancement." Arthur pulled out a sheet of paper. It was an enlarged photocopy of a driver's license. He held it up for Derek to see, and then for Vanessa. "Her name is Suan Miller," Arthur announced loudly. "Born in rural West Virginia, marital status married, occupation unemployed housewife." Derek snatched the paper from Arthur's hand. His eyes scanned the personal data printed on the ID. His jaw dropped. Sue. Swan married. What the hell is this, Vanessa? You told me you were single. You told me you went to grad school in Europe. That's an old ID, Swan stammered. An old life. I'm divorced. My name is Vanessa now. That's just my hillbilly hometown. Oh, is that right? Arthur cut in swiftly. He pulled out the next document. It was a stack of papers that looked like police records and local newspaper clippings. Then how do you explain this, Mrs. Miller, a criminal warrant from the county sheriff in West Virginia from 2 years ago? Felony fraud and grand larceny. The victim was a local hardware store owner who was swindled out of $20,000. Status suspect fled the state, currently an active fugitive. I watched Derek literally stumble. He backed up until he hit the wall, his legs giving out completely. He stared at Swan with absolute horror, as if the woman in front of him had just morphed into a gargoyle. The woman he worshipped. The woman he had bought Chanel bags for, using my dying mother's money. The woman for whom he had violently kicked me out of my home was a fugitive con artist named Swan from the backwoods. You're a con artist. Derek's voice was barely a whisper drowned out by a crack of thunder. You told me your dad owned a shipping company. You're an idiot, Swan suddenly shrieked. Her elegant, refined facade shattered into a million pieces. Her accent dropped entirely, revealing a thick, harsh, rural drawl. There was no more fake, breathy baby voice. What kind of man are you? One piece of paper gets shoved in your face and you piss your pants. If you actually loved me, you wouldn't care about my past. This isn't about your past, Derek roared, his face burning red with humiliation and rage. It's about you lying to me, my money. The money I gave you to open your boutique. Where did it go? Swan let out a wicked, sinister laugh. She didn't even try to look pretty anymore. She looked feral and dangerous. A boutique, huh? You actually thought I was going to open a store that money went to paying off my gambling debts. You were just a walking ATM Derek, a selfish, egotistical Mark who was easy to manipulate with a short skirt and a little flattery. Those words struck Derek right in the gut. I could see the excruciating pain in his eyes. Not the pain of a broken heart, but the agony of his massive ego being utterly pulverized. He realized how unbelievably cheap his worth was. He had traded a devoted, faithful wife who had nursed his mother-in-law to the end for a criminal who saw him strictly as a paycheck. Enough! Arthur interrupted, firmly stepping in before Derek could lunge at Swan. You can continue your domestic dispute outside the gates of my client's property, but before that there is one last fact Mr. Vance needs to be aware of. Arthur pointed his pen at Swan. This woman did not come to New York alone. The private investigators hired by the late Eleanor discovered that she fled her hometown with something that did not belong to her, and the rightful owner is currently pulling into the driveway. Swan froze. Her aggressive demeanor instantly reverted to sheer terror. What? Who's coming? Someone who very much misses the life savings you ran off with, Arthur replied coldly. I stood silently watching the two of them turn on each other. I felt hollow. A year ago, I might have cried seeing my husband fight with someone else, but now I just felt nauseated. I was disgusted by how low they both were. Mom was right. Money and lust strip away a person's mask incredibly fast. Derek, who fancied himself a king, was nothing more than a pawn played by a low-rent grifter. Derek turned to me again. This time his tears were mixing with the rain on his face. He dropped to his knees on the marble floor. Sarah, forgive me. I was conned. She brainwashed me. Please don't throw me out. I have nobody else. My money is gone, Sarah. My accounts are empty. She drained everything. I stared down at him with zero sympathy. You weren't brainwashed, Derek. You were just greedy and ungrateful. You had a wife, a beautiful home, a good career, but it wasn't enough for you. You went looking for thrills elsewhere, and now you've won the prize. Enjoy it. But Sarah, pack your bags. I cut him off sharply. Or I will have the neighborhood security drag you both out like the trash you are. Swan scoffed loudly. She snatched her designer handbag, likely bought with my mother's money, and spun around, heading for the stairs. Move out of my way. I'm getting my clothes. Hold it right there, Swan, Arthur called out. The only things you are permitted to take are the clothes on your back. Every single designer item purchased with funds from Derek and Sarah's joint account is currently evidence in a legal dispute. If you walk out that door with that Hermes bag, I guarantee the police will intercept you at the cul-de-sac for grand larceny." Swan stopped dead in her tracks. She spun around, eyes blazing. "Are you insane? Those were gifts. Gifts bought with embezzled money," Arthur corrected smoothly. "The choice is yours. Walk out empty-handed and free, or walk out with stolen goods and spend the night in county lockup." Frustrated, Swan slammed the purse onto the floor. She let out a muffled scream, the unmistakable sound of total defeat. The living room felt like a courtroom where the gavel had just dropped, and the sentence was total annihilation for those who had committed treason. But the surprises for the day weren't over. A long, harsh blast of a car horn pierced through the sound of the rain outside, signaling that a new chapter of their ruin was about to begin. The horn was aggressive and completely out of place. In our quiet, manicured subdivision, a car horn was usually just a polite, short beep to say hello, but this was long, repetitive, and angry. It sounded like mechanical fury. Arthur glanced toward the open double doors. "It appears our out-of-town guest has arrived, right on time despite the weather." Derek, Swan, and I instinctively looked out toward the driveway. The heavy rain blurred the view, but under the glow of the automatic streetlights that had clicked on due to the darkness, the silhouette of the vehicle was clear. It wasn't a luxury sedan or a shiny SUV like my neighbors drove. It was a rusted, beat-up Ford Econoline van. Dried mud caked its side panels, and the license plate was from West Virginia. The heavy side door of the van slid open violently. Out stepped a middle-aged man whose appearance drastically clashed with the wealthy surroundings. He wore a peeling faux leather jacket, faded work jeans, and work boots that were instantly soaked. His face was weathered and exhausted from the long drive, his eyes red from lack of sleep, his jaw locked tight with rage. He stepped out into the downpour without an umbrella, his hair instantly matting to his forehead. But it wasn't the man that made my heart drop. It was who stepped out with him, two small children, a boy and a girl, no older than 5 and 7. They looked bewildered and terrified, shivering in oversized jackets, gripping the man's coat tightly as the rain pelted them. "Swan!" the man roared, his voice booming over the thunder. It was a scream laden with pain, betrayed longing and volcanic anger. He didn't care that he and his kids were getting drenched. His wild eyes locked onto the interior of my house, searching for his target. Inside the foyer, Swan's face turned the color of a corpse. Her body shook violently, not from the chill, but from pure, unadulterated terror. She backed up slowly, trying to hide behind Derek, who was still kneeling weakly on the floor. "I'm dead," Swan hissed, barely audible. Derek, still bewildered by the chaos, looked over his shoulder at the terrified woman. "Who the hell is that, a loan shark?" Before Swan could answer the man, Travis was already sprinting up the driveway, dragging his crying, frightened children with him. He took the porch steps 2 at a time and barged right through my front doors without knocking. Dripping wet, he tracked mud and water all over the expensive floor. His eyes swept the room and locked onto the woman cowering in the back. "Found you!" Travis yelled, his voice cracking. He pointed a trembling finger at her. "You evil! You left your own kids to starve so you could go shack up with some rich guy." Derek struggled to his feet. A tiny shred of male instinct kicked in, even though he was broken. "Hey, buddy, who the hell are you busting into a house and screaming?" Travis whipped his head toward Derek, eyes blazing. "Who am I? I'm her husband, the legal husband of that demon right there, Swan. And you must be the rich prick who stole my wife." "Husband?" Derek stumbled backward, looking as though he'd just been punched in the face. "But she said she was a widow. She said she didn't have kids." "Widow my ass," Travis spat venomously. "We ain't divorced. She ran off 6 months ago. Told us she was taking a waitressing job in the city to send money back. And what does she do? She runs to New York to play sugar baby." Travis turned his fury back to Swan. He didn't get physical, but his glare was murderous enough. "Where's the money, Swan? Where's the 20 grand we saved for my dad's heart surgery? The kids' lunch money for the year? You took everything. My dad died, Swan. He died last week because we couldn't pay the medical bills while you're up here living in a mansion in a silk dress." Travis's voice broke. This tough, rugged man began sobbing uncontrollably right in my foyer. The two children began to wail loudly along with him. "Mommy! Mommy!" they cried out, reaching for the woman they had missed so much, the woman who had chosen luxury and a stolen husband over taking care of them. My chest tightened painfully, not out of jealousy, but out of basic human empathy. I looked at Suan with entirely new eyes. She wasn't just my rival anymore. She was a monster. How could a mother abandon her babies and steal her dying father-in-law's medical funds, all to chase a fake, luxurious lifestyle in New York? "You're a bad mommy," the older boy sobbed. Suan was backed into a corner near a large decorative floor vase. She looked panicked. Her crocodile tears started flowing. "Travis, honey, listen to me. I was working up here. I sent money back, I swear." "Sent what?" Travis roared. "We never saw a dime. You changed your number. If this lawyer here hadn't tracked me down and paid for my gas to drive up here, I never would have found the rat hole you were hiding in." Derek stared at Arthur, his mouth hanging open. You brought him here?" Arthur nodded calmly, his face betraying no emotion. "I contacted Travis 2 days ago after our investigators verified her real identity. I believed he had a right to know where his fugitive wife was hiding, and I believed Sarah had a right to see exactly what kind of woman her husband left her for." Derek looked at Suan, then at Travis and his weeping, exhausted children, and finally at me, standing clean, composed, and dignified next to Arthur. Reality hit him like a freight train. He had thrown away a diamond to pick up a piece of trash. Derek pointed at Suan, his voice trembling with disgust. "You have kids, you have a husband, and you stole from a dying old man. What kind of sick psychopath are you?" "Oh, shut up!" Suan snapped back, her panic turning into vicious defense. "You're no better than me. You dumped your devoted little wife for me, didn't you? Don't play the saint. We're both pieces of trash, Derek. The only difference is I did it for the money, and you did it because you couldn't keep it in your pants." Suan's words stripped away Derek's hypocrisy for everyone to see. Derek was struck dumb. He couldn't argue. It was the absolute truth. He was no better than her. They were a match made in moral bankruptcy. I stepped forward, approaching the children. It broke my heart to see them soaked and shivering. Even though their mother had ruined my marriage, these kids were completely innocent. "Travis," I called out softly. He turned roughly, wiping his tears. He looked embarrassed to be crying in front of a wealthy stranger. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to cause a scene in your beautiful home," he said hoarsely. I just wanted her to answer for what she did." "I understand," I said gently. "Please take the children to the side porch over there. It's enclosed. I'll have my housekeeper bring out warm towels and hot tea. They're freezing. You handle your business with this woman, but please do not do it in front of the kids." Travis looked at me with deep awe and gratitude. He probably never expected the wife of his wife's lover to treat him with such kindness. "Thank you, ma'am. You're a good person. I am so sorry for what my wife did to you." I nodded. Travis quickly ushered his crying children out the side door onto the covered patio, leaving Suan completely isolated and cornered. Now it was just the four of us in the grand foyer, me, Arthur, Derek, and Suan. "Well," Arthur broke the silence, "you both have 30 minutes left to pack your bags, and Mr. Vance take a good long look. This is the woman you were ready to die for. This is the woman you threw your legal wife's luggage onto the street for. Do you still wish to defend her?" Derek shook his head weakly. His face was totally blank. He stared at Suan with dead eyes. "Leave," he whispered. "What?" Suan asked. "Get out!" Derek screamed hysterically, grabbing the large decorative vase nearby and hurling it against the wall, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. "Get out of my life. Take your lies and get out. I never want to see your face again." Suan smiled a bitter, wicked smile, even with tears in her eyes. "I'm leaving. But remember, Derek, you started this. You approached me at that bar. Don't act like you're the victim." She turned and marched toward the front door, but she stopped short. Travis was waiting for her on the front porch, his face hardened with fury once more. Having secured his children, he was ready for her. Suan had nowhere left to run. She would have to face her husband, her debts, and the total ruin of her life back home. Derek collapsed among the shattered porcelain shards, weeping loudly, wailing like a child. He cried for his stupidity, for his lost wealth, and for the regret that had arrived entirely too late. I looked down at him without a single drop of sympathy. Those tears wouldn't bring back the smile he wiped off my mother's face. Those tears wouldn't erase the pain he put me through for a year. Crocodile tears held no currency here. "Save your energy, Derek," I said coldly. "You're going to need it to carry your bags out of my house. Your time is almost up." The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily, acting as a cruel countdown for the two people who had just lost everything. Outside, the sky seemed furious, unleashing a torrential downpour that created a watery curtain between the warmth of my home and the harsh cold of the outside world. Thunder rolled long and deep, vibrating the window panes and adding to the heavy aura of defeat inside the room. Arthur stood tall in the center of the foyer, arms crossed, exuding unshakable authority. He checked his gold watch, then looked down at Derek, who was still slumped on the floor amidst the broken porcelain. "Time is ticking, Mr. Vance," Arthur said, his voice calm but pressing. "You have less than 20 minutes to empty your closet. Remember my warning. Personal items only: shirts, pants, underwear. Do not even think about touching the luxury watches, electronics, or the keys to the sports car that were purchased with commingled funds sourced from my client's inheritance. If a single non-personal item is missing, I will have the local precinct on the line immediately. Grand larceny and spousal fraud charges are waiting for you." Derek lifted his head. The face that was always lifted in arrogance was now slick with tears and snot, his eyes swollen and bloodshot. He looked at me with an expression that was hard to read, a pathetic mix of regret, disbelief, and a desperate hope that this was all just a nightmare he would wake up from. "Sarah," he called out weakly, his voice cracking. He crawled slightly toward me, ignoring the ceramic shards that surely scraped his knees. "Is there really no second chance? 5 years? Sarah, we've been married for 5 years. Is it all just gone because of one mistake?" I looked down at him from my vantage point, feeling as though I were looking at a complete stranger. "One mistake," I repeated, my tone frigid. "You call an affair that lasted for months, a calculated plot to steal my mother's estate, the embezzlement of her medical funds, and humiliating me in front of the entire neighborhood, one mistake? You didn't slip up, Derek. You had malicious intent. You were fully aware of what you were doing every step of the way." "I was stupid, Sarah. She played me." Derek pointed a shaking finger out the door towards Suan, who was currently being yanked down the driveway by Travis. "Don't you drag me into this." Suan shrieked hysterically as Travis gripped her arm. "Let go of me. I'm not going back to that trailer park. I won't go back to being poor." "Shut your mouth!" Travis bellowed, his face rigid with anger. "You are going back. You are going to visit my father's grave, and you are going to beg your children for forgiveness. Stop dreaming about living the high life in New York. Your life here is over." Suan thrashed, trying to break free, but Travis's grip was ironclad. She looked back toward Derek, desperately hoping he would defend her, but Derek looked away. Finally, with the last bit of her defiance, Suan spat on my driveway before being dragged into the pouring rain. Her screams and curses faded away, swallowed by the roar of the storm and the heavy slam of the rusty van's doors. The old engine sputtered to life and slowly drove off, taking the con artist and the destruction she brought with her back to where she belonged. Now, it was just Derek. "Your bedmate has departed, escorted by her own karma," Arthur said sharply. "Now it is your turn to stand up, Derek. Don't embarrass yourself any further by begging at the feet of the woman you just threw away." Derek finally got up, swaying unsteadily. He trudged heavily toward the master bedroom, the room he had proudly claimed as his own domain just hours ago. Arthur and I followed closely behind him, ensuring he didn't pocket anything that wasn't his. Inside the bedroom, Derek pulled a large canvas duffel bag from the top of the closet. With rough, desperate movements, he began throwing his clothes inside work shirts, casuals, jeans. He stuffed them all in without folding them, creating a sad, tangled mess of fabric. His hand paused as he reached for a velvet watchbox on the dresser. Arthur interjected sharply. "That is the Rolex Sarah bought for your birthday last year using her annual bonus. That is a disputed asset. Leave it." Derek froze. His hand trembled in midair. He stared at the watch, the ultimate status symbol he used to show off to his golf buddies with empty eyes. Slowly he pulled his hand back. A profound, crushing shame washed over his face. He finally realized that without my money and my gifts, he was just an average guy with a mediocre salary who could never afford the luxury lifestyle he craved. He resumed packing, tears streaming down his face continuously. I stood in the doorway, leaning against the doorframe, watching his downfall with a heart that was rapidly turning numb. I used to lay out his clothes for him. I used to iron those shirts. I used to pick out his ties and make sure he looked perfect every morning. Now, watching him shove those wrinkled shirts into a bag like a fleeing criminal, I realized my love for him was entirely dead-killed by his own betrayal. 15 minutes later, Derek walked out of the bedroom holding one overstuffed duffel bag in his right hand and a black garbage bag full of shoes in his left. That was it. 5 years of marriage, and that was all he was allowed to walk out with. We walked to the front door. The rain showed no signs of stopping. It was coming down harder than ever, as if the sky wanted to ensure Derek was soaked to the bone the second he stepped outside. At the edge of the porch, Derek stopped. He turned to look at me one last time. His eyes scanned my face, then swept over the property, the lush landscaping, the wide veranda, the crystal chandelier glowing in the foyer. He stared at all the luxury that had just slipped right through his fingers. "Sarah." His voice was barely audible over the rain. "Where am I supposed to live? My wallet is empty. You probably already canceled my credit cards, right?" "That is no longer my concern," I answered flatly. "You have parents in Jersey, don't you? Go home. Apologize to your mother for failing to be a decent husband. Or go find a cheap motel. You're a grown man, Derek. You have hands and feet. Work to support yourself. Stop relying on a wife. Besides, it's raining. You threw my suitcase out when the storm was rolling in. You didn't care if I got caught in the rain. Why should I care about you?" Derek fell silent. My words pierced him straight through the heart. He had no arguments left. Poetic justice was doing its work flawlessly. Arthur stepped forward, gesturing toward the open iron gates. "After you, Mr. Vance. Time is up." Derek took a deep, shuddering breath, a breath filled with immense pain and regret. He stepped down the porch stairs and out into the torrential rain. Instantly, he was drenched. His expensive dress shirt clung to his skin, his hair plastered against his forehead. He dragged his heavy duffel bag down the driveway, limping slightly. He looked small, fragile, and pathetic. He was no longer the arrogant king who had been screaming on the lawn this afternoon. Outside the gates, a few neighbors were still peeking through their blinds or standing on their covered porches. Despite the storm, they stood as witnesses to how the false king was exiled from a castle that was never his. Derek reached the sidewalk. He stood there for a moment on the cold, wet concrete. He looked back over his shoulder, staring at me, standing dry and warm on my porch. His eyes begged for mercy. He hoped I would crack. He hoped I would call him back, tell him to come inside and hand him a warm towel like I always used to. But I didn't move an inch. I stared at him blankly. No expression, no tears. I walked out into the light mist blowing onto the porch and headed straight for the iron gates. Derek grabbed the iron bars, his knuckles turning white. "Sarah, please." I grabbed the heavy metal latch. With whatever strength I had left, I pushed the gates shut. "Goodbye, Derek," I whispered. Clang. The iron gates slammed shut, right in his face. I immediately slipped the heavy industrial padlock back into place and turned the master key. The heavy click was absolute and final. It sounded like a judge's gavel. Our relationship was over. This marriage was over. My suffering was over. Derek remained standing there, gripping the iron bars, resting his forehead against the cold metal. He wept bitterly in the rain, completely alone. No money, no house, no wife, and no mistress. He had truly lost everything in a single day. I turned my back to him. I didn't want to look at him ever again. I walked back toward the house. My footsteps felt incredibly light. It felt as though a 1,000-pound weight had just been lifted off my shoulders. Arthur was waiting for me in the doorway with a proud smile. He patted my shoulder gently as I walked past him. "Your mother would be so proud of you, Sarah," he said softly. "You are strong. You successfully defended your fortress. I nodded, fighting back tears of gratitude. "Thank you, Arthur. If it weren't for you and Mom." "It was your courage too, my dear. Now get some rest. Lock the front doors. I'll wait in my car for a few minutes until Derek is completely gone before I head out." I walked inside and pulled the heavy oak doors shut. I turned the deadbolt twice and slid the security chain into place. The roaring sound of the rain instantly became a muffled hum. Silence blanketed the foyer. But this time the silence wasn't suffocating. It was peaceful. It was the silence of a home that had been cleansed of a parasite. I leaned against the door and closed my eyes, and for the first time all day, I let a single tear fall. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but a tear of profound relief. The storm outside might still be raging, but the hurricane in my life had finally passed. An hour had gone by since the gates closed. Derek was gone. I didn't know where, and I didn't care. Arthur had also left after ensuring the perimeter was secure, leaving me with strict instructions to have a trusted locksmith change every single lock in the house first thing in the morning. Now I was completely alone in this massive house. The weather outside had calmed down. The violent thunderstorm had softened into a gentle, soothing drizzle. The distinct, earthy scent of petrichor drifted in through the vents, bringing a natural coolness that replaced the hot, tense air of the afternoon. The warm lights of the house reflected beautifully on the marble floors, which were finally drying. I didn't go straight to bed. There was one thing left I had to do, a cleansing ritual. I walked through the house, turning off unnecessary lights until I stopped in the living room. There, on the glass coffee table, lay the shattered pieces of the vase Derek had thrown, and right next to it was the object that made my heart ache every time I saw it, Mom's blue teacup, the one Swan had used. I picked it up carefully, holding it like a sacred relic. There was still a ring of dried coffee along the rim and at the bottom. A flash of anger flared. I turned on the faucet, letting the hot water run fast. I grabbed a sponge, squeezed a generous amount of lemon-scented dish soap onto it, and began to scrub. I scrubbed it hard. I scrubbed every single inch of its ceramic surface, the inside, the handle, the rim. Thick white suds completely covered the cup. In my mind, I wasn't just washing away coffee stains. I was scrubbing away the traces of Swan, the traces of Derek, the traces of the lies, the betrayal, and the agonizing pain that had infected this house. I rinsed it under the running water until it was spotless, until it literally squeaked clean under my thumb. Then I washed it again and rinsed it again. I did it 3 times until I was absolutely certain the cup was purified, restored to the pristine state it was in when Mom used it. Once it was dry, I set it gently on the kitchen island. Its blue color was vibrant. The floral pattern was still as beautiful as ever. The cup, much like me, had been dragged through something dirty and disgusting. But now it was cleaned again. It was still intact. It was still valuable. Suddenly, my eyes fell on the stack of documents Arthur had left on the dining table. He had intentionally left copies of the trust and the financial reports for my records. But tucked between those thick legal folders was a small, plain white envelope, an envelope I hadn't noticed earlier, written across the front in neat, elegant cursive that shook just slightly, was handwriting I knew better than my own. To my dearest daughter, Sarah. It was Mom's handwriting. My hands trembled as I picked it up. This must have been written when she was very sick, probably the same day she signed the estate over to me. I carefully peeled open the flap, terrified of tearing the paper. Inside was a piece of stationery that carried the faint, lingering scent of jasmine, my mother's signature perfume. I sat down at the dining table under the dim chandelier and began to read. My beautiful, strong Sarah. If you are reading this letter, it means my intuition was right. It means Derek has disappointed you so deeply that Arthur had to pull out our ultimate weapon. Forgive me, sweetheart. Forgive me for not telling you this directly. I didn't want to ruin the happiness you thought you had. I still held on to a tiny sliver of hope that Derek would change. But as a mother, I had to prepare for the absolute worst. Sarah, do not shed a single tear for a man who doesn't know your worth. Do not feel like you failed. You are a phenomenal wife, and you are the most devoted daughter a mother could ask for. This failure does not belong to you. It is entirely his. This house, the home your father and I built with our blood, sweat, and love, is your fortress. I put it in a trust for you so you will always have a safe place to land, a place where no evil person can ever kick you out. Remember my advice: be an independent woman. Tears are allowed to fall, but never let your dignity fall with them. Wash your face, brew a cup of coffee, and look toward the future. You are still young. Your life is just beginning. Start this new chapter free from parasites. I will always be watching over you from up here, protecting you through every corner of this house you love so much. Loving you forever, Mom. Our tears spilled over my cheeks again, but this time they were incredibly warm. It felt exactly like being wrapped in my mother's embrace. The words in that letter seeped deep into my bones, filling me with a tremendous newfound strength. Mom was right. I hadn't failed. I had just saved myself. I folded the letter and pressed it against my chest. "Thank you, Mom," I whispered into the quiet night. "I promise you, I'm going to be so happy." I stood up. My throat felt dry. My eyes landed on the canister of coffee beans on the pantry shelf, the specialty French roast Mom always loved. I filled the electric kettle with spring water and clicked it on. The quiet rumbling of the heating water was deeply comforting. I took the blue teacup I had just purified, scooped in the dark coffee grounds, and added a cube of raw sugar. When the water boiled, I poured it in slowly. The rich, bold aroma of French roast instantly filled the kitchen completely, chasing away the damp smell of the rain and any lingering traces of cheap perfume. I stirred the coffee gently. Thin wisps of steam curled and danced in the air. With the blue cup in my hand, I walked into the front living room and approached the large window, the exact window where Suwan had stood just hours ago, the window where she had arrogantly watched me get thrown out. I pulled back the heavy drapes and stood there. The dark glass reflected my silhouette. It wasn't the reflection of a weak, broken woman sitting on a suitcase. It was the reflection of a woman standing tall in her own home, holding her mother's heirloom cup, soaking in the peace she had fiercely fought for. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The dark clouds were finally breaking apart, revealing the shy, silvery glow of the moon. The suburban street was quiet and slick, gleaming under the streetlights. Derek wasn't there. Swan wasn't there. There were no whispering neighbors. There was only absolute tranquility. I took a sip of my coffee. It was bitter, but finished with a perfect touch of sweetness. The warmth spread through my chest, melting away the very last knots of tension in my muscles. This was the taste of freedom. Tonight I was going to sleep deeply in my own bed without anxiety and without a liar sleeping next to me. Tomorrow morning I would wake up as a brand new Sarah. I would change every lock, paint the master bedroom a new color to erase Derek's presence, and maybe plant some new hydrangeas in the front yard. The old stained chapter of my life had been slammed shut at the front gates this afternoon. Now, standing in front of this window, inhaling the scent of French roast and gazing out at the peaceful night, I was finally ready to write a new one. The story of Sarah, the lady of the house, a truly free woman. And for the first time all day, I smiled a genuine, radiant smile.